Welcome to our deep dive. We're tackling 1001 Nights, but not in the usual way. We're not reading the whole thing. No way. You guys gave us some essay questions, really smart ones, that dig into the themes.
Okay, yeah.
And we've got key passages, too, from both Richard Burton's translation and Jonathan Scott's.
I like that. I like having both of those.
Yeah, a highlight reel.
A treasure map.
Exactly. A treasure map to the good stuff. I'm all about shortcuts to literary brilliance.
Well, let's see what we've got.
Okay, first up, betrayal. And what happens because of it. It seems like that's at the core of so many of these stories, don't you think?
Absolutely. And it's not just the act itself, but the consequences. You know?
Right.
Like the ripples, the prompt really makes us think about the different forms betrayal take.
Okay, so not just good guy, bad guy.
Right. Like infidelity in marriage, that's a big one.
Yeah.
Breaking a sacred oath or like manipulating someone to get power. It gets messy.
It does. It makes it much more, I don't know, human.
Human. Yeah. Complicated.
Yeah. And the essay prompt, it wants us to think about how all those situations, how they affect the characters, not just what they do, but who they become.
Exactly. Their whole being, their whole outlook.
King Shahzaman, when he finds out his wife's been unfaithful.
Oh, man.
It crushes him.
Yeah.
You read that passage and you feel his pain. It's so raw. Have you ever felt that kind of betrayal?
Yeah, I think most of us have on some level. Maybe not as dramatic as a sultan and his wife.
Yeah.
But that feeling of like your world is shattered, that's something a lot of people can relate to.
It's like the foundation is gone, Everything you thought was true.
And the text really emphasizes that. It talks about how Shahzaman can't eat, can't sleep. He can't even see the beauty around him anymore.
It's like he's lost himself.
Totally.
And then think about Scheherazade. She's staring down the ultimate betrayal.
The sultan's death sentence.
Yeah. And her weapon, her stories.
It's such a clever twist. She's not just a victim, she's fighting back. But with her mind, her creativity.
And don't forget, her own sister almost gets caught up in the sultan's decree. Talk about a betrayal, like double whammy.
Ooh, yeah. That moment shows us how high the stakes really are.
Life or death.
Right. Scheherazade's trying to save herself, sure, but she's also taking on the burden of protecting so many others.
Wow, that's a heavy responsibility. Makes you think about the power dynamics, too.
Absolutely. And it leads right into our next essay question, which is, are the women in these stories simply deceitful? Or is there more going on?
Because it's easy to see some of them as the villains, right?
It's tempting, yeah. Especially at first glance.
But then you have characters like that enchantress with her Palace of Tears. That's some serious power, right?
It's fascinating. You've got this woman with incredible magic, but she's also deeply sad. And it all ties back to this idea of being trapped.
Right. It's like a prison she built for herself and her former lover. Kind of messed up.
Yeah. And the essay question asks us to think about whether she's truly in control or
if the power is controlling her.
Yeah, exactly. It's a double-edged sword.
And then it makes you wonder, how does society view women like that? Both back then, when these stories were told, A and D now.
Women who have both beauty A and D brains, are they admired or are they feared?
It's a good question.
A really good question. And I think it shows that there's way more to these female characters than meets the eye.
Let's switch gears for a sec. Talk about storytelling itself, like Scheherazade's using it to survive.
It's not just entertainment for her, it's life or death. Every single story, it has to keep the Sultan hooked.
And wanting more.
Yeah.
Makes each tale so much richer.
Layered.
Layered, yes. We're reading on multiple levels, just like the Sultan is.
And it's not just the what of the story, but the why. Why is she telling this story at this moment?
It's like that story about the fisherman who lets the genie out of the bottle.
Oh, yeah. Classic.
Be careful what you wish for.
Right. And it's a perfect example of these stories within stories. On one level, it's a simple tale about bad luck. But on another, it's making us think about power.
Ingratitude. Or the lack of it. I mean, the genie wants to kill the fisherman, even though the guy set him free.
Talk about ungrateful, but it makes you think, right? About how sometimes in our own lives, we do things with good intentions.
And they backfire.
Totally.
And it keeps the listener hooked.
Yeah.
Us and the Sultan. Because we never know what's coming next. Speaking of twists, next question's a biggie. Are these characters controlled by fate? Or do they have free will?
The age-old question. And 1001 Nights doesn't give us an easy answer. There's definitely magic at play, genies granting wishes, enchanted objects.
Popping up out of nowhere, yeah.
But you also get this feeling that characters make choices.
Choices that change their destinies.
Right. It's like, are they reacting to fate or shaping it?
Like that story with Prince Ahmed and the magical apple, carpet, and pavilion. He gets those amazing gifts, but he chooses how to use them.
Exactly. He's not just sitting back letting fate happen. He's taking action, even if his goals, they're influenced by magic.
It's like a mix, right? Destiny, A&D, free will. What do you think? Do you feel like you're in control of your life? Or is it all, like, preordained?
That's a tough one. I think maybe it's a bit of both. Sometimes we have more control than we think, and sometimes things just happen.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And maybe that's what these stories are trying to tell us. Maybe we don't always get to pick our starting point in life.
The circumstances we're born into.
Right. But even small choices, they can make a difference. They can ripple out and change our lives in ways we never expected.
Okay, before we jump into the next batch of questions, we got to talk about the supernatural stuff. The genies, the ghouls. That's what makes these stories so memorable, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just there for fun. It serves a purpose.
Oh. Like what?
Well, these supernatural elements, they often drive the plot, yeah. But they also reveal things about the characters. Their hidden desires, their anxieties.
Like the three princes and Princess Naranihor getting abducted by that genie.
Exactly. It's exciting, but it's also scary. And it makes you wonder, what do those genies represent?
What do you think they represent?
Well, they could be a metaphor for the unknown. The forces that disrupt our lives that we can't control. Like when something happens out of the blue and turns everything upside down.
Okay, yeah. The unexpected.
Maybe they represent our own internal struggles, our desires and fears, but like blown up to a supernatural level. What do you think, listener?
That's something to ponder. It's wild how these stories can work on so many different levels, and we're just getting started.
We were talking about genies, right? And how they could be like these unknown forces that mess with our lives. But what about when the supernatural gets mixed up with wanting power? Like really wanting it.
Ooh, that reminds me of the story with, what's his name? Duban, the physician.
Duban, yes.
For anyone who hasn't heard it, it's about this brilliant doctor who cures the king. But then things go south. Fast.
It's definitely a warning, that story. Duban, he's super talented, right? But he gets caught up in the king's whims.
And the king is not the most stable guy.
Not at all. Which makes you think about, like, where's the line with loyalty?
Right. Like when you say enough is enough.
And how easily power can corrupt, even when it's in the hands of someone who seems, well, not that bright. It makes you think, Have you ever been in a situation where someone demanded your loyalty, but it felt off?
Ooh, yeah. I think we've all been there at some point. Maybe not with a king, but, with a boss, a friend, even family.
Yeah.
When you have to decide what your principles are worth.
Exactly. And sometimes walking away is the hardest but bravest thing you can do.
It's like that story with the enchanted fish.
Oh, I love that one. So funny.
Right. Poor fisherman catches these fish and they can talk. They're like, nope, not gonna be dinner.
They're feisty fish, but there's a deeper message there too, about respect.
Even when you're in a tough spot, demanding fairness, like, we have a right to exist too.
Yeah. And that way they talk, if you reckon, we reckon. If you pay your debts, we pay ours. What do you make of that?
It's like a code almost. A secret message about how justice works in the world.
Karma.
Kind of. Like every action has an equal reaction, good or bad. That comes up a lot in these stories, doesn't it?
Definitely. What goes around comes around, as they say.
It makes me think about that enchantress again, trapped in her palace of tears. We talked about her power, but at what cost?
Yeah.
What's your take on her situation?
She's a tragic figure, really. So much power, but so much sadness underneath it all. She was betrayed by the person she loved, and her way of dealing with that was, well, extreme.
Magic can be a dangerous tool.
It can. She used it to punish him, but also to keep him close, frozen in time. It's this whole cycle of grief and revenge. It's like she's holding on to the past so tightly that it's destroying her.
And it makes you think, even magic can't erase pain, can it?
Nope. Sometimes you have to let go to heal.
Which is interesting because she's using her magic, her storytelling, to survive, right? But it's all about the past. Whereas Scheherazade, she's also using stories to survive, but hers are about the future.
That's such a good point. Both of them are wielding narratives, but in completely different ways. One's holding on, the other's building something new.
It's like, what stories are we telling ourselves? And how are those stories shaping our lives? Are we stuck in the past, or are we creating a new future?
Whoa, that's deep.
Right. Heavy stuff. But I think it's worth thinking about.
Definitely. But let's get back to 1001 Nights for a minute. We've talked about genies, but there are also those ghouls lurking around. They're not just there to spook us.
Oh, no. They're like the dark side of human nature. The greed, the lust for power, all that.
A shadow self.
Yes. Like, remember those 40 ladies on that mysterious island?
Oh, yeah. Those ladies were up to no good.
Not going to spoil it, but they have a, shall we say, unique way of dealing with visitors.
That story really makes you question things. Like, what would you do in that situation? Where's the line between what's right and wrong? What temptations would make you cross it?
It's also about transformation, isn't it? The character shifting between human and animal forms. Makes you wonder what's real and what's not.
Transformation is a big deal in a lot of these stories. It's like nothing stays the same. Identities can change. And sometimes even the craziest transformations tell us something about being human.
We're always changing too, right? Growing, adapting.
Exactly. And maybe these stories are saying that change is inevitable. Sometimes it's scary, sometimes it's beautiful, but it's always happening.
Like Sinbad's adventures. One minute he's getting swallowed by a giant snake. The next he's flying on a giant bird. Talk about transformation.
Sinbad, he's the ultimate transformer. So many challenges, weird creatures, ups and downs.
But he never loses his sense of wonder.
He's resilient, always bouncing back, ready for the next crazy thing.
But it's not just about the adventure, is it?
No. Sinbad's voyages, they're really about the journey itself. They tell us that even when things are scary and uncertain, we can still find a way forward, we can learn, we can grow.
And he comes home to Baghdad with all this treasure and wisdom. It's like the real reward is the experience, not the stuff.
Exactly. It's about what you gain along the way, not what you bring back.
So we've got magic, adventure, betrayal, love, even some humor. But as we keep exploring these tales, I'm noticing another theme. Justice.
Oh, good catch. It's definitely there, weaving through the stories. Sometimes justice wins, sometimes it doesn't.
We see corrupt leaders, people getting falsely accused. It's a constant struggle to find the truth, especially when everyone's lying.
It's like that story with the merchant who gets blamed for stealing a pearl necklace. Talk about bad day.
Total nightmare.
No.
But he gets lucky. He meets this wise governor who can see through the BS, and in the end, justice is served.
It's a good reminder that even when the world feels messed up and unfair, there are still people who are trying to do the right thing.
It gives you hope. But then there are stories like the one with the hunchback. Mistaken identities, crazy coincidences. It's a mess, and innocent people almost get hurt.
And it makes you wonder, can justice ever really win? Especially when things are so rarely what they seem.
Yeah, deep thoughts.
Right. But that's what these stories do. They make us think about the big questions.
And they don't give us easy answers.
Yeah.
Which is probably a good thing. We were talking about justice.
Right.
And how tricky it can be. But something else keeps popping up in these stories. Hidden identities. It's like nobody is who they seem.
It's true. 1001 Nights is full of disguise and trickery. Ghouls pretending to be princesses, princes acting like gardeners. It makes you wonder if anyone is being real.
Right. And those hidden identities, they drive the whole story forward. You're never quite sure who to trust.
It keeps you guessing.
Like that story, the 3 calendars.
Yeah.
The blind guys.
Oh, yeah.
Each one has this crazy secret past. They end up at a party thrown by this wealthy woman. And, well, things get a little wild.
That story is a great example of how 1001 Nights mixes humor and danger. You've got these seemingly harmless blind men, but each one is hiding something huge, something that could get them killed. It's a reminder that you can't judge a book by its cover. Sometimes the most ordinary-looking people have the most extraordinary stories.
And then there's the Caliph himself. He stumbles into all this chaos and finds himself in a pretty compromising position. Talk about wrong place, wrong time.
It shows that even the most powerful people aren't immune to fate's little jokes. The Caliph is used to being in charge, but suddenly he's at the mercy of these mischievous blind guys. It's funny, but it also makes you think about perspective. Sometimes getting thrown out of your comfort zone can lead to unexpected discoveries.
It's good to be humbled now and then, I guess.
Okay.
But speaking of perspective, we also see some really powerful love stories in these tales. The kind of love that breaks all the rules. The kind that takes you on amazing adventures.
Love that endures no matter what.
Exactly. And it makes you think, what would you do for love?
What are your limits?
Yeah. Like the story of Skemslnihar and the Prince of Persia. Their love is forbidden, but they risk everything to be together. Classic star-crossed lovers. Passionate, longing. It makes you ache for them.
It's beautiful, but it also breaks your heart a little.
It does. It makes you think about the choices we make in our own lives, you know? What are we willing to sacrifice for love? And how much freedom do we really have when society tells us who we can and can't love?
Those are big questions, timeless questions, and 1001 Nights makes us confront them.
It does. And it does it through these amazing stories.
Like the tale of Kamar al-Zaman and Princess Budur. Their journey is full of magic, mistaken identities, and crazy obstacles.
And that darn talisman that keeps getting stolen. It's like a symbol of their love, constantly under threat.
Exactly. Their bond is always being tested. It shows how fragile love can be, especially when you've got jealousy and deceit and people trying to tear you apart.
But they never give up on each other, do they? No matter what, they keep fighting for their love. It's inspiring.
It is. It shows that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice, a commitment, a willingness to fight for what you believe in.
Okay, so we've got stories about love, about betrayal, about justice, about the power of storytelling itself. It feels like we've only scratched the surface of what 1001 Nights has to offer.
We have, and that's the beauty of it. There's always more to discover, more layers to peel back.
But before we wrap up, there's one more story I think we should touch on. The story of Zayn al-Aznom and the King of the Genies. It's a warning about greed and a reminder about humility.
Oh, yes. Zayn starts out with everything, wealth, power, but he learns the hard way that those things don't bring happiness.
He lets it all go to his head, makes some really dumb choices.
And loses everything. It shows how fleeting material wealth can be. The real treasure is wisdom, compassion, gratitude for the simple things.
And that scene with the King of the Genies, wow. It's intense.
It's like the king is a reflection of Zayn's own internal struggles, you know?
Yeah, it's like he's facing his own demons.
Exactly. The king forces Zayn to see his flaws, to understand where he went wrong.
And ultimately, Zayn finds redemption. He goes back to a simpler life, humbled by the whole experience.
It's a beautiful transformation. Zayn's story shows us that it's never too late to change, to let go of our ego and choose a different path, one that's based on humility and appreciation.
So from betrayal and magic to love and redemption, 1001 Nights has taken us on quite a journey. It's amazing how relevant these ancient stories still feel today.
That's the power of storytelling. These tales transport us to other worlds, they make us question our beliefs, and they leave us with questions that stay with us long after the story is over.
So, dear listener, what story will you take away from Scheherazade's world? Maybe it's the tale of a powerful enchantress, a wise caliph, a pair of star-crossed lovers, or a reckless prince who learns what truly matters. Whatever resonates with you, remember this: 1001 Nights is more than just a collection of stories. It's a reflection of us. Our hopes and fears, our capacity for both incredible love and devastating betrayal.
And just like Scheherazade used her stories to captivate the Sultan and ultimately change his heart, these tales have the power to inspire us, to make us think, and to remind us of the beauty and complexity of being human.
So go explore these stories, be curious, be open-minded. Who knows what wonders you'll find in the world of 1001 Nights?